using a bump map in Cycles. In this video you will see how to use a black and white image as a bump map. Now normal and height maps are both types of bump map, and once again we'll be seeing the illusion of surface detail. Now before we hop over into Blender, let's have a look at a height map versus a normal map. Now they are similar yet quite different at the same time. Both describe the detail along a surface even if there isn't any there in terms of geometry. Now a height map, as you can probably guess by its description, simply says how high a surface is. Now you do have to be careful with a height map because you've only got so many steps in between black and white that you can actually use to map out height. So if you try to do a staircase, you would very quickly run out, whereas little dimples in a surface you could quite easily do with a height map. Now a normal map is ever so slightly different. So taking the same shape, you can see here that the normal map pretty much repeats itself. Now a normal map uses RGB values, so whereas a height map is just between 0 and 1, black and white, 100%, a normal map uses RGB values, so it's a vector. It can not only say whether a surface is pointing left or right, but up and down as well. It's quite hard to get across in a 2D image, but as you can see here, the first half and the second half are actually repeats on a normal map, where as a height map they're actually quite different. But the combination of the two can create the illusion that a flat line is actually that shape. So now we've got a little bit of understanding, let's go play with this now over in Blender. Okay, so we're now over in Blender. So the first thing we'll want to do is obviously make sure we're in Cycles, because this is all about making sure it's right. Now we need to click Use Nodes, and I'm going to switch to the 3D view and make sure we're in rendered mode so I can see what's going on. Excellent. So we're now in rendered mode, and I'm looking at this pillar top here. It doesn't matter which part of the pillar you're looking at. Well, in this case, I think I'm going to go with something a bit lower down, that pillar section, because I do want something with a bit more interesting geometry, and this has certainly got it. Now, when I select that, we can see straight away the material has changed, so I can go ahead here and select pillar top, and it will apply that material to it. Perfect. Now we have that. What we do need to check is that the new pillar section that we had before, now do I need that? Well, there's no value in that particular material, but that was being used with the Blender render, so you do have to be careful when switching across here. So in fact it'd be much better in this case if I were to remove that material altogether and just say we're using the pillar section. Is it the pillar section? Let's just quickly check that by hopping into Blender render and not using nodes. Okay, yes it is, we were using the pillar section for those details. So we're going to use nodes and hop over to Cycles, and there we can, well, I'm going to have to recreate this here. So let's go in and add ourselves a shader. That will be a basic diffuse shader. We're going to require an output, a material output, and link them together. There we go. I inadvertently removed my setup, so I'm going to just have to do it again. And an image. So we're going to have a texture and image texture. In fact, we're going to have to use another image texture as well in order to control the bumps themselves. And we're going to use the black and white speckly image that we had before. So let's go ahead and apply that material. There we go, or rather that image, to use as the colour as we did before. And go ahead now, I'm going to duplicate that. It's a very quick way of having another image texture. And let's go in and set the pillar bump. Now, if I connect the pillar bump to the colour, we get an idea of what's going on. I'm happy that that is the right image. Now, the one thing we didn't do before, and can be very important, is tell Blender how to apply this particular image, because at the moment it's doing its best guess, and I presume in the background it's working out that we've got a UV map set for it, so that's fine. But sometimes it is good to be explicit about this. So we need something called a texture coordinate. It tells Blender how to map that. So much like in Blender Render, we looked and we saw it as a UV. This doesn't actually have anything discrete telling us that. So let's go ahead and make sure that's applied as well. So I'm going to add, and under input we have texture coordinate, and we're going to have a series of options. I'm going to zoom back in so we can see what's going on. Generated normal UV object, etc. We've seen these before. Now we're just going to use UV, and this won't change anything on the image itself because it's already mapped with UV, but it does explicitly say to Blender, or rather Cycles, use the UV map for this so we get it right. So those two things are in place. Now what can we do here? Well, let's experiment a little. So we've got this black and white image. Obviously if we plug it into the colour, it's going to cause us a few problems because we'll lose this base colour that's here. So let's try, there is no alpha channel, so I'm going to ignore that. Let's try plug it into the roughness. What does that do? Oh, it kind of gives it a different kind of texture going on. I'm not sure whether I like that or not. It's not very clear what's going on. It's very, very subtle. And of course we don't want to add too much detail to a pillar that might be quite a way away. Let's try adding it to the normal. Okay, so it's gone a lot darker here, and it's kind of getting towards what we had before. Now there's another thing that you could also do here, and this is going to make quite a dramatic difference, is plug this colour straight into displacement. Now that isn't really a great, I'm going to unplug here the normal. That really isn't a great way of achieving normal maps and bump maps in general, but it does give you an idea of what can be done. As we can see here, there is quite a bit of detail there, but we've got no control over it. That's what we're lacking at the moment. If we plug either one of these in, we just have to accept the result that comes out. We've got no control unless we go back and alter the texture. But we can alter that texture live with a couple of things. Well, first of all, we're trying to use a bump map, so let's tell Cycles that we are using a bump. So let's go ahead here and add in, I believe it's under vector, because it's going to create some vector coordinates, 3 sets of numbers, and let's select bump, and we can add it in line just here. Fortunately the new version of Blender shifts things along, which is quite nice. And then we've got a series of options here, and this is still plugged into normal. We can plug it into displacement. There's lots of things we can do with this, but for the moment, oh, that looks quite good actually. But you can play with it and play with it and play with it, and eventually you'll get to something that you like. Just remember the settings as you go through these. So I'm going to plug this back into normal because I'm not going to alter the displacement in this case. And we've got a few options here. So at the moment, the colour is controlling the normal and it's going straight through. Now, is that the same as just plugging it directly in? Let's have a quick comparison. That one there. And let's plug this in and see what happens. Yes, that's pretty much just passing the information through. So there's a couple of options here. What happens if we set the strength to, well, you can have the strength at 1 or you can have the strength at 0. Does that make a difference? I can't see any difference going on. It's good to experiment with these. So we could have the colour controlling these. So what happens if we get the colour controlling all of these? Of course I'm on about the colour node, whether it's black or white. Oh, since it's black or white, we might do with switching this here to non-colour data. Okay, so having a look at this, that's starting to look pretty good actually. It looks like a slightly rough surface, which is kind of what I'm aiming for with this. However, we've still got very little control. Let's see if we take distance off. That's something we can slide up and down. What happens if we put that at 0.1? Always good to work with extremes here. So 0.1 is quite low, and obviously you can go lower than that. And let's try, can I go up to 5? Doesn't seem to make any difference. However, when we plug it in and use the colour as the distance, it does make a difference. However, I feel this is slightly too strong, so we need some more control. It'd be nice for a slider. Or it does depend, of course, what you're trying to do. There is no right or wrong with this. With most things. Let's see if we whack the strength up. Okay, so we've got a bit more control if we manually control the strength as well. In fact, I quite like the setting that we've got there. Now we can have some more control by actually telling Blender about a normal map as well, but we won't do that quite at the moment, especially since this is just a bump map. We'll get on to normal maps in a bit. So now that we've got that set up there, let's go ahead and add some specularity and a few other things, but I'm not going to do that for you here. Of course, it's time for a challenge. Okay, I'd like you to mimic the Blender render. Okay, lots of renders there. So render a nice example of the Blender render setup that you have and use it as reference material. Now experiment with the nodes to get a similar appearance. Don't aim to get it exact because that's going to be very challenging, especially as these two rendering systems use completely different methods to work out their light, etc. Now a little hint here, nodes you'll probably need. You're going to need another shader to add a kind of a sheen to it, a specularity. You're going to need mix shaders to put those together. You will require a bump node as well. Now, just a reminder, there is no correct method. And remember, there is no right way of doing this, so I can't repeat that enough. This is up to you to make it how you like it to be. Obviously, there's some wacky ways of doing it, and if you haven't done the speckles, you're going to end up with a slightly different texture, but that's absolutely fine. Being creative can end up with awesome results, and do think through logically as you go. Need a bit of specularity? Then we might need a glossy shader going on, so a few hints there as well. Now finally, use as many nodes as necessary, but no more. You don't want to make it too complicated. And remember, you can group them together if you've got a nice little package that does something useful. So pause the video now and give that a go. Okay guys, welcome back. Let's hop straight on over into Blender. Okay, so first of all, let's go and get myself a decent shot of the Blender render version. Okay, so I'm going to have to switch over to my camera view so I can see what's going on, and I can't see anything there, so let's go ahead and move our camera. So I'm going to lock the camera to view and then try and find something. I'm going to use pad 0 to find it. There we go. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at the moment. There we go, that's much better. A while to render out, and there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and render that. I'm not sure, don't really care what it overwrites. We are in slot 1, so that's absolutely fine. And then I can have a look at it in a moment and see how it comes out. Okay, so that has rendered out there, and I can zoom in and see what's going on the surface. So that's absolutely great. So I've got a reference image that I can compare. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to arrange my windows in such a way that I can have that reference image just open at the top here. So let's go UV image editor, and I think that's the same thing. Excellent. So we can see here we've got some bobbles on the surface, and I'm not sure what this window was before. I'm going to set it to properties for the moment and switch across to using nodes and back across to cycles. Let's zoom in here. I only need a thin sliver there to see what's going on, so let's zoom in here. Oh no, I'm adjusting the camera again. Just remember to undo that bit there. Let's zoom in and have a look at our model. Okay, so we've got this bumpy thing here. This would be much better as the node editor. That's what it was before. Excellent. So up here we've got a bit of specularity, so I know I'm going to need that. So I'm going to need a mix shader. So let's go ahead and add one of those in. That was the last thing I searched for. Excellent. So that's in there, and obviously it's gone a bit dark at the moment. Now, which way round do I want these? I want it to be primed only a little bit of gloss when we come in, so we need a gloss shader. Let's go here and type in gloss, BSDF, excellent, and plug that in. Now here, obviously we've got a bit of white coming in, and has that all the reflection that we need? Is that enough on the surface? I'm not sure. Well, let's play. Playing's always good, so let's try using the actual speckly texture to define where the speckles are. So where it's high, the white, it should be a bit shinier than otherwise. So let's lower that down. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. let's bring that up a little. Okay, I do like that glossy effect, so I'd be careful. You could really easily overdo a glossy shine to something. So I like that around the edges, that's good. And it is looking pretty nice. Let's just experiment a little. That does absolutely nothing to help us, so I'll unlock that. Now, I think these bumps are still a little too strong compared to the reference image up there. It looks not like a smooth pillar, it looks more like a cast concrete pillar. So let's go in and change the strength down here. Let's just lower it down. Getting there. That might be a very low number. There we go. Again, trying to get it exact, it could be a fool's errand in this case. But there we go. That's starting to look quite nice. What happens if we just remove this? We get much more defined edges around there. In fact, in some cases, it's just a bit too shiny, really. I don't know. Oh, you could go backwards and forwards with this all day long. I'm starting to like how this is looking. Obviously, we're going to be looking at it not so close up, so it's always good to look at it from a distance. Let's try it now. But I need to zoom out here so I can see a bit more. I'm going to plug that speckly texture into the colour and see what difference that makes. That's much better. I do like the subtle shine coming through and the highlights there rather than anything else. And what we can do here, we can just flip the mix shader over and we can see what is actually happening. So it's quite useful to be able to do that. Of course, we could plug it directly in as well if we wanted to. So with a factor, roughness of 0 here, it is, well, it doesn't have any highlights basically, but as we increase that, we go through a period where it does have highlights and then goes, well, basically when roughness is 0, it acts more like a mirror, and we don't want that. And of course, all the way over here, well, it's just too rough to be shiny. So we've got to find somewhere in between, and not too shiny. I'm just going to keep upping that a little more. I think around 0.3 is going to do it. Excellent. So let's move the factor back to bring back some of that. We don't want 100%. Let's try 0.1, about 10% gloss. A little bit more. Maybe one more. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. Let's zoom in and see if the texture is there. Okay, it does have a mottled texture to it. Let's just bring this up ever so slightly. And we can see it's very low at the moment. That's that value there. So let's try 5. That's 0.05. Let's try 0.1 and see what that comes out as. Okay, a little bit smoother than that. And again, we're just changing how that appears over and over again. So that was 0.1, so how about 0.08? And again, you can go round and round and round. I think 0.05 was pretty good. Yeah, that's got a mottle to it, but not too much. And it's got a sheen to it, a lovely gloss to it, but again, not too much. I'm pretty happy with that. How did your pillar come out? Please share it in the discussions, and I will see you guys in the next lecture.